Good afternoon and welcome to Do You See What I See? I'm Yolanda Nava. We're going to do a part two with a very special guest, Rosalio Muñoz. He's a conscientious objector, a student of history, an activist, and somebody who's played a very important role in our Chicano Mexican American Latino history in the telling of the story of the Chicano Moratorium, August 29th, 1970. We aired the first part in August, Do You See What I See? And we're coming back with a part two. I had left off with the fact that five people were killed that day at the Chicano Moratorium, August 29th, 1970, a watershed in our history in this country, and that a beloved journalist, Ruben Salazar, was killed that day. And the inquest was reported to be a sham and a whitewash by the official KCET television PBS documentarian that was covering the official inquest. So I'd like to pick up now with our guest, Rosalío Muñoz, who was the organizer, activist, conscientious objector who led the challenge to protest the war and to create the Chicano Moratorium. Welcome, Rosalío Muñoz.
Glad to be here. I just want to say that I was uh, a spokesperson for the moratorium and helped uh, initiate the momentum. When I refused induction, we did it expressly to infuse a greater, uh, uh, well, the slogan that had already been started in our community in the resistance to the Vietnam War and dissatisfaction with the war on poverty, that our front line is not in Vietnam, but in the struggle for social justice in the barrios. So that it was a two-edged thing that both commenting on the discrimination we faced and that was part and parcel of the high death rate and used as a way to further the aims of the government and that unjust war, uh, so that uh, when during that once it got the sheriffs attacked, uh, what I'm convinced is that they attacked to uh, to begin breaking up the militants of the Chicano community, as well as the anti-war movement and civil rights movement. It you know, well, and that Salazar, the night before the moratorium, got together with some of the uh, top organizers from the Mexican American generation, most notably Bert Corona, who was a man that led so much of the progressive, the peace, the defend the immigrant issues, his whole life. And Salazar called him, and he brought together a key person of the Mexican American movement going back into the 50s, and also uh, uh, Corona's top aide, and a leader in the harbor trade unions, which is probably the most powerful because of the importance of our seaports, in San Pedro and Long Beach. But anyway, what Salazar told them was that he felt very strongly that there was infiltration of uh, saboteurs or provocateurs in both the moratorium and the Brown Berets that were a significant group at that time, and that he thought that there was a strong possibility, and he thought that the provocateurs would be used to attack the moratorium, and that he was discussing how to increase the security for that, and it turned out to be true. He saw that, and he spoke of having evidence of that kind of infiltration, but he also concluded that in Washington, D.C., that the national leadership, including the president, but many others, were very upset that such a big demonstration was going to be happening in Los Angeles, a national one with Latinos and other African Americans and peace movement people from around mostly the Southwest, but Chicago in particular also was large. And so that when it actually, well, he said the reason that they wanted to, they were disappointed with the local government efforts was that they needed in the war to hold on to the people of color, to the minorities, who were the linchpin, the key forces that they will need to continue their war effort. And so that from that, you could really see that the attack, the inquest was part and parcel of the attack and continuing efforts, and to undermine the Chicano movement, its anti-war aspects, and also its demand for stronger steps against poverty in the U.S. And so that the step that the inquest did, what it was a kangaroo court, and its
Yes.
real intent was to blame the Chicano community for the riot. But we knew that people have been talking, there's going to be a riot, and there were young guys and others that were saying, yeah, we need that. But our estimate is that the people weren't going to want a riot. It was the moms and the dads and the brothers and the sisters that had people die in Vietnam, their lives ruined. They came back with PTSD. They came back with drugs in their bodies and determined. And it was, to me, the women eventually in the community, especially the moms, saw that their sons were no longer the same people.
Yeah.
And that could not come from a good war, and that there was something wrong with the war. And there was a common thing of their beginning to think about the mothers of the Vietnam soldiers and what was happening, that were 30 times or more than what our deaths were in that war.
Well, let me interject here that one of the reasons that the moratorium was created was because Mexican Americans, that was the term of those days, Mexican American soldiers were 25% of the war dead at a time when we were only 4% of the national population. So it was, we were the cannon fodder, our men and women were the cannon, well, they were just women then, men then, were the cannon fodder for the war. So the inquest reflected that, that, that attitude that this was to be stopped and held back, and the intention of peaceful demonstration, peace and justice demonstration, was altered to make it sound like it was a riot that was caused by these radicals in East Los Angeles, which was not the case.
Yeah, but what did happen is they attacked the moratorium right from the beginning of our rally. I had given the welcome, and it was I was just finishing up, and I noticed that way in the back of the park there was something going on, but I had to have a little uh, press conference with mostly European, but uh, reporters that were not at the press conference we had a couple of days before. And by the time I came back up, there was beginning to be pandemonium happening, and we didn't know what was going on for several times. We have tapes of what was being taken from that public TV, PBS, were taped the whole thing of what happened, and uh, they just attacked. There was nothing really happening there, and uh, my parents were there. My older sister with her infant child were there, and my sister and one of my close cousins all seated together. And that was everybody. It was like a huge fiesta. And in the park, it was like a huge picnic. And so 30, 40 years later, when we had all our family together, and somehow or other, the moratorium and the movement came up at the dinner table, and we all assembled at our parents' place. And we started the we guys, and so that was always talking politics and history. Uh, my mom broke into there and she said, those little girls, the folklorico from Epiphany Church that were from like 12, 13 years old down to 6 years old, were out there dancing in the costume. Uh, and she said they were so pretty and danced so well. And then she says the sheriffs had no business being in the park. And that was the sentiment then, and the sentiment later. But they had to try and blame us, and the inquest went against that. What was it made it clear to the community and historically was on the 16th of September, a week and a half later. Uh, there were 200 and some estimates in the media were 250,000 people there for the record for that march. And we had somewhere between 5 and 10,000 people marching in contingents in the parade, and we were cheered. So
Yes.
the community knew that was saying no to the attack. That was saying no to the inquest that found uh, there was death at the hands of another, but it was a mistake of this of a sheriff. And we even have reasons to doubt really that. But this was just a tremendous show of where the community was because the people from all the neighborhood groups. And if they didn't have somebody there in their immediate family, they had relatives that came from out of town and that told the same story that we did. So that showed where the community stand was. And so it did much damage to blame it all on us. And that was the official story. Uh, the LA Times for a while, that was their employee. And he was a good friend of the Chandler family and others. And he was just a tremendous reporter. And so that was the start of them trying to blame the community. They didn't convince the community.
Well, the
And
thing that's interesting is that, we're a long way, a long decades away from that. But what is going on today is almost a repeat performance anyway, only it's magnified by 100 times.
yeah,
And we've gotten to this place because we weren't able to stop things when they got started way back when, in the 1970s. It's the the death of Ruben Salazar has been questioned by many. There are many of us that are doing research on that, and there'll be more that'll be coming out, very soon about the truth in that. And I must mention that very reputable people, both he was a labor leader at that time, but he later became congressman. Esteban Torres told me when he was 90 years old that the inquest was a whitewash. And I have in my book, It's All of the Frijoles, the official documentarian of the for KCET that covered the inquest, Jesus Trevino, he says, and I wasn't looking for this when I put the book together. He said, I was the official documentarian. I witnessed a couple of situations of police brutality. He said the inquest was a whitewash, period. So bring us forward after the September 16th tremendous demonstration of support from the community to stop the abuses in the community, to do something to help the veterans who are returning from the war, to stop just incarcerating, young Chicano men because you felt like doing it, to stop the injustices in school. We had bilingual education, all of that, but that is being now totally obliterated or threatened with obliteration. And where does that leave us now as we look back at what the role of the CIA, the FBI, all this provocateurism that took place? How does that parallel and bring us forward then to now?
Well, one thing that the moratorium uh, gave full circle, all the major groups that were involved in that war. We were the latest ones, maybe the smallest group, but there were plenty of us. And so, what that meant, what was going on in Vietnam, the veterans had started having large demonstrations nationwide, and then that demonstrations went into the front lines. And there was a thing called fragging that was growing and growing. And that was where the soldiers in the front lines began refusing to go out on search and destroy. And they called it fragging for fragmentary grenades uh, that ended up being thrown when the lieutenants or sergeants would get there with guns and say, get out of the trench there and go search and destroy, and like they were threatening. So then there would be a grenade or a shot, and they were gone. And there was hundreds and hundreds of those kinds of incidents that were happening. The troops were refusing to fight, and and that's the reason they had to pull out in well, 73 was when they went, but that's when McGovern, even though he didn't get a huge amount of votes, he had challenged the war in the 72 election, and tens of millions of people voted for him, and that added to the pressure, so that in January of 73 the U.S. pulled out uh, of the war and took its troops out. And Congress, even though had to pass different bills to say that to outlaw the Nixon administration from sending more troops or holding on to troops. And the church, Frank Church, who I think he was from Idaho, but he began the main voice against the CIA, so that it wasn't just the FBI and their COINTEL program that went against the peace movement and the civil rights movement and other things to break up groups. And that came out very, very strong during the mid 70s. And they had oversight over the FBI and the CIA at that time. But we haven't had that kind of oversight since. And so the US actually had to change its operation and then needed to have uh, uh, other countries do a lot of the work. And so that's what the style became in the following years, and it kept going. Uh, uh, that acts against Cuba maintained in the pressure. We went into Chile and overthrew that. Then we uh, came going into the Central America in the 80s and uh, uh, trying to overthrow and regime change there. And then there's so many other places in the world. And so this had been seen. Powell, who had ended up, who was a big judge and then got on the Supreme Court shortly thereafter, wrote this letter to the establishment, and that called for what happened in the 60s and actually early 70s, the civil rights movement, the labor movement, the peace movement, the women's movement, the environmental concerns had all come up and were a threat to the ruling forces in the U.S. economy, the big international and national uh, uh, heads of our economy and policies were doing that, and that was presented. And so very shortly after, uh, they began with neoliberalism and cutting back. Actually, under Ford, I mean, I would imagine Nixon had his plans, and actually Watergate showed some of that. But that became the policy of the US. The power of what they called the Vietnam Syndrome changed US approach to the military and ending up with proxy wars being a key part of US thing, because they knew that we couldn't occupy uh, North Vietnam and South Vietnam uh, because we didn't have the troops that would stay in an occupation. So that ended that war really. The everybody, including the troops, and from my point of view, it was the women in our barrios, and especially the mothers, that saw that. And once we built the momentum, the countering to the machismo of the men, of the veterans. You know, the traditions, oh, we got to be there. We can't leave. We got guys over there. We gotta keep backing them up on the front lines. That got uh, defeated in what happened. And and so there has not been that strong a support. 9/11 uh, increased that. But that was part of all of what went on from what happened in Vietnam and what happened to those mass movements. But actually, September 2nd, just 4 days after the moratorium, there were a couple of things that the FBI sent out to find out some things that were happening in San Diego. The president of Mexico came and met with Nixon that had been prearranged. So they talked about would the moratorium stuff interfere with that. But then J. Edgar Hoover signed one, said an hour or so afterwards, where he addressed the president, the attorney general, all of the military forces, all of the intelligence sources, and was going to starting consultation with what to do about the moratorium. So that had what Corona said, that his observation would they made up their mind they were going to get rid of the moratorium committee, but not just the moratorium committee. They did with infiltration, with making it more and more difficult. But we accomplished. We had a huge demonstrations January 31st, where about 10,000 people. That was a local LA County demonstration with 10,000 people, critical of the police. Probably the largest protest of police brutality ever in Los Angeles. And then we had a march from Calexico to Sacramento in the summer of 71, where we were protesting Reagan's threat and his, if anything, more reactionary than Nixon. So there were all of those things. So the point I'm making about the inquest was that it was a beginning of seeking to contain the Chicano Mexicano thing, and it was Latino unity. At the park, the flag of Puerto Rico was flying. There were large contingents that came from Chicago and New York from the Puerto Rican movement. So those were key things that happened. So we had, following up on this and affecting the whole nation and affecting us, that we had neoliberalism came in the rest of the 70s. And then in the 80s, we had the plant closures due to globalization, where all of those things happened. And then with the fall of the Soviet Union, we had eventually the decisions were made to be a world hegemon. We basically were, after World War II, we're the major power, but after that, it increased because during the 70s, they developed, I think it was David Rockefeller, the Trilateral Commission, which was the US, Japan, and Western Europe. That was the working with us to control or to save the world from communism, etc. So that I think in seeing that, you see the roots of what we have now today, in where the threat of World War III is more and more and more. And relevant to what we're doing, we have challenges to the Monroe Doctrine. You see that challenge happening in Venezuela, but I think we're going to see that happening in Mexico, because Mexico is now going to be on the BRICS organization and is working economically and scientifically and other things to work with China and the other groups, Russia and the others, in terms of having the global South there. So there's a threat to the white supremacy approach that has been happening since, at least the 18th century, and that was developing before. It's a major thing that is happening, and I think we have to be aware of that. I think it's going to be coming up even more this week. If you keep your eye on what Mexico is doing, that's happening. And we have more troops on the border of Mexico. And the fact that they don't think that they can contain protest of continuing to control the world is that now we have the enemy within. And that means you and me and our neighbors and everybody else that is not MAGA, that is, actually, that is not moving our country in a fascist direction. I think it's obvious now So that what happened with the moratorium showed that the people could stop that war. And we stopped that war. And Vietnam is one country. And it's got its, it has its complaints about China, but it's very strong now also in BRICS because it's a structure that's a group, makes group decisions and consensus. So that threat to the Monroe Doctrine is has to do with where did it really come from? It came from wanting to control uh, the U.S., the manifest destiny from shore to shore. And it showed also that where this country is placed, that we have two, where we have a shore on the Pacific and the shore on the Atlantic. And that's what brought and had brought us being a co-partner or a junior partner with Great Britain in the 19th century. And then because Great Britain uh, couldn't completely control us, so they made us a junior partner, which we overcame economically. Uh, once we were uh, coast to coast, had the resources of this country, with a large part of it stolen from Mexico. So that's where I see the lessons of the moratorium. And I could go into all the demonstrations and the infiltration and all of that. It's a sad story. We need to talk about that. But there were people that became later on saw that wanting violence. We were attacked. I was replaced as chair of the moratorium for a month and a half when people said you're nonviolent. You and Ramses and these other, you're nonviolent, so you're not militant enough. And they came with
Well,
guns.
nonviolence is a very important tool, just as hate is a
Yeah.
very powerful weapon to divide people.
Oh
That's
yeah.
what's been used, and every dictator throughout history has used hate as a very uh, strong tool to divide and conquer, and to particularly divide into different groups and then identify the other group, which is now Latinos, to consider them the other, the enemy, not worthy of existence, and why not just eradicate them? And so this whole criminal process, uh, anti-constitutional process of the ICE raids with unmarked cars is really an example of fascism at its worst
Yeah.
and of a dictatorship without license. It's very frightening. So how
Okay.
do we respond to these times, which we have allowed to happen by not making more action against them
Well,
over the course of the decades? We
well,
kind of
we
sleptwalking
have
through the period.
we have to defend free speech and assembly. And that's why he's wanting to have, the enemy within. That's why we have troops here in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Washington, D.C. Now they're going even into the South as well. Uh, so that stuff is growing. This recent stuff of young MAGA youth that say, we love Hitler, uh, coming out, that's getting more coverage right now. But there are mass demonstrations tomorrow. There's no kings. We don't, we
Right.
have a constitution. We have a country that was created not to have a king or a dictator. And so that demonstration happening tomorrow is very important. We have a vote on Proposition 50. Trump, he ordered Texas to come up with 5 more districts, and he
Right.
sent them the map. He sent them the map to use. So we have to fight fire with fire, and so there is a chance. There's going to be even more news, but the momentum of the public and a coalition that includes uh, Democrats, independents, uh, and Republicans as part of it to defend our Constitution, our right to assembly, and our right to push this country to be peaceful, to reverse that military uh, budget. And heck, the all the what do you call it? ICE people, that the tremendous amount of money and staff, they're really like a more than a police. They're being used as a military attack on the community. And now what I'm reading is, especially in Chicago and DC, they're also the ICE is going after African Americans and being used in those ways in these occupations they want to have in the different cities on the war against uh, in the country against us this anti-American movement.
Well, I think in many ways, a lot of people have said that the ice uh, person power is are probably perhaps the reason they're masked just because they're the pardoned felons
Yeah.
during the January 6th insurrection several years ago. And that's perhaps why they are the brown shirts, as Hitler had in Nazi Germany. And we're seeing similar playbook patterns followed to the letter. I don't know that the public is terribly aware of these things because we don't tend to study history. We really still don't teach it correctly in the schools. And so, how do we learn from history if we don't know any? And how do we
Yeah.
change history if we don't know any? So, connecting these dots is very important, Rosalío. And I'm grateful to you for connecting those dots for us.
And yes, and we have to deal with that super bill and all the monies it was spent with, and we have to be putting the pressure on Congress and putting the pressure on the Republicans to break away from this dictatorial rule. He dictates to the Republican representatives. Now, a few have broken off. We need more so that we can stop them from cutting off uh, things. I live on Social Security basically, and I still get that, and that's controlled right now. But the food stamps that I get to make it easier to make it through the month. Now I just got a letter today to say we may not be getting food stamps from the state. So standing up on all of those levels, we have to get the best of the Democrats and as many as we can to take stronger stands, and that is happening, but it has to be a coalition from everywhere on this, and building a nonviolence and common decency are very things. I think integrity and improving our integrity and our being able to unite and take on more of the struggle that we have had for our Constitution, the struggle against slavery, the struggles for women's rights, the women's right to vote, so many other things. Those traditions, we have tremendous democratic positions.
Yes,
And,
we do.
and we as Mexicans, we bring from Mexico here the democratic base values of our ancient cultures and of the struggles we've had to go on dealing with the United States. I see we got to educate people about Benito Juarez, who said that the essence of peace is respecting the rights of others.
Yeah.
And that's something that
El
we
respeto ajeno es la ley or something. Yeah.
entre naciones como la gente, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz.
Es la paz, correcto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what we can add, but the democratic conditions that we have, but all of the immigrant groups and the indigenous groups that we have here today, it's beautiful to see they're developing their languages here in
Yes.
Tampa, in Los Angeles, and uh, it's I can watch one of our key organizers that died last year, Gloria Arianas. My father was from Mexico, so she was Chicana, and the mother was Tampa, but was part of, don't say it, because that's the historical realities that the Tanba had to say they were Mexican because the indigenous had fewer rights. And so that until, and actually it was during the Vietnam War that those movements at Alcatraz and the other indigenous groups nationwide began developing, and that also merits our support and our need as a country to well, to improve on our history. And right now, the big battle is with MAGA and their fascist uh, um, aspects, of which the president is a leader.
Well, that's certainly a fact, and I think we'll wind up for today. I think you've made some very powerful points. We're called upon to act with courage, with deep faith, with integrity, to maintain our highest principles that are stated forth in our preamble. And all those aspects of the preamble, and I urge people to read it over and over again, hold it in your heart as an intention. It is a prayer. It's a spiritually affirmative prayer. It's an intention. It's actually uh, an ideal, a vision. And as an intention, it becomes a spiritually affirmative prayer that we hold these truths in order to create a more perfect union. And so I love that vision because we do have these principles in our hearts and in our minds. The Chicano moratorium was an expression of that, as have other peace and justice movements been throughout time and history. And it's time to call forth these principles again and these ideals to have the courage to step up and stand against everything that is seeking to destroy our Constitution and our rule of law.
Yeah. So if you, along with marching tomorrow, those of us in California, if you have your ballot, mail it in. Yes, on 50.
Yes, on 50, absolutely. This is to redistrict, to prevent the manipulation of redistricting, such as is going on in Texas, to maintain our districts so that they're fair-minded and allow the equal right to vote and to have a voice in our legislative process, our electoral process, each and every for each and every person in each and every state. And California is on the ballot this November, so be sure you do vote yes on 25 and turn
50,
in your
50,
ballot
50.
before its due date. Rosalío, I want to thank you again for all the work you've done over the past decades. You're still going strong. God bless you. Keep you strong. And thank you so much for joining us on Do You See What
Oh,
I See?
thank you, and let's do it
Gracias.
again.
And to the audience, we'll be back next month with a November speaker. And I thank you for watching us on Do You See What I See? It's an important vehicle and voice to challenge right now what is going on. We need to know our history. Learn it, read it, study it. Be sure and vote. And we'll see you again next month on Do You See What I See? Thank you for joining me. I'm Yolanda Nava.